Chapter 10. What happened next? Even though the almanacs continued to predict rain and snow and phases of the moon, and even though Salem's town clerk still registered new births and collected taxes as usual, not all of the trouble came to an end once the witchcraft hysteria began to die down. Some people still thought the rituals or the trial should continue. Others, who had been afraid to speak up, were mortified by the hangings. Newly freed witches and their families were embittered and impoverished. The church fell in despair due to lack of funds, and division among its members continued to fester. And despite Governor Phillip's attempt to achieve a much-watered peace with the French and Indians, the Second Indian War would grind on and on until 1699. But when a 22-year-old Harvard graduate named Joseph Green was ordained as a minister of the Salem Village Church in 1698, things began to look up. A natural negotiator, Green initiated a meeting of peace, so the families who had left the church could reconcile with those who had stayed, and a sense of normality finally began to return. 18 years later, on October 17, 1711, the province of the Massachusetts Bay signed a reversal of attainder, an act that declared a general amnesty and removed the witchcraft charges against George Burroughs and certain others. This was both good and bad. The good part was that it restored the rights and good names of some, but not all, of the living and dead witches, and awarded some money to their heirs. There were two bad parts. One was that the legislature only gave money to people who asked for it or whose names were included on a list that left lots of people out. And the other bad part was not one single person would ever be prosecuted for any of the crimes they had committed during the witch trials, whether they had falsely accused their neighbors of being witches, hanged the innocent, ruined their reputations, or stolen all of their property. Meanwhile, here's what happened to a few of the people who were tangled up in the witchcraft's wicked web. Chief Justice William Stoughton. Stoughton believed he had done a great job of ridding the land of witches, and was furious that Governor Phipps had set them free. On January 3, 1693, he ordered the hanging of everyone who had been exempted because they were pregnant. But Governor Phipps, whose wife was among the accused of witchcraft, blamed Stoughton for the entire tragedy and wouldn't allow him to hang the women. So Stoughton angrily quit his job as a judge. Phipps' slap in the face to the Chief Justice didn't hurt Stoughton's career one bit, though. When Phipps was ordered to return to London later that year, Stoughton became the acting governor of Massachusetts, serving until his death in 1701, and even doing double duty as Chief Justice in 1699. He never once apologized for his role in the trials. The other judges. On January 14, 1697, Judge Samuel Sewall took the blame and shame for his role in the witch trials and asked for the people's pardon. The same day, 12 other jurors signed a document apologizing for unwittingly shedding innocent blood, and the Massachusetts legislature declared that the first annual fast day is everyone's penance for all the sins committed during the trial. Each year after that, Sewall made sure to observe a fast and pray for forgiveness. High Sheriff George Corwin. On May 15, 1694, Justice Stoughton's court helped out Sheriff Corwin once again by exempting him and his heirs from any liability for his failure to return all the goods he had stolen. Sheriff Corwin died at home of a heart attack in 1696. He was only 31 years old. Not one cent he extorted or stole from his innocent victims was ever turned over to the Crown, or the colony, or the victims themselves during his lifetime. The accusers. Reverend Samuel Parris. Parris was the only person who offered any restitution to the accused witches and their families, an attempt to keep his job by appeasing church members who had lost their loved ones because of the trial. He offered to subtract £6 from his salary for 1692 and £6 for 1693. The author seems strange indeed. His total yearly salary was supposed to have been £66 sterling, 22 in money and the rest in provisions. But ever since 1691, the church committee had refused to pay him a cent. In 1694, he apologized for his mistakes and tried to make peace with the congregation. placing the blame on his servants, and Satan the devil, the roaring lion, the old dragon, the enemy of all righteousness, he said, I do humbly own this day because the Lord and his people, that God has been righteously spitting in my face. But in the end, neither Paris's offer of restitution nor his apology comforted his opponents. In fact, after Rebecca Nurse's son and son-in-law and Sarah Cloyce's husband directly accused Paris of destroying the innocent people and their families, they withdrew from his church. On May 3rd, 1695, 16 young men, 52 householders, and 18 church members sent a petition to Reverend Increase Mathers and 8 other area ministers requesting that they advise Paris to quit and find a job someplace else. Paris refused, even though the ministers offered him a good job elsewhere if he would leave gracefully. On July 14th, 1696, Paris's wife, Elizabeth, died, but by then most of the town people had lost all sympathy for him. Forced out of his job in 1697, he finally left town, but his reputation preceded him. Though he remarried and had 2 more children, the only jobs he could find were in impoverished little frontier towns of Stowe Concord and Dunstable. He died in Sudbury in 1720. Betty Paris. During the trial, Mrs. Paris had been worried sick about her daughter Betty's fits and absolutely refused to keep using the child to find witches. Toward the end of March 1692, Reverend and Mrs. Paris sent Betty off to Salem Town to live with Stephen Sewall, Paris's distant cousin. Most of Betty's symptoms stopped practically right away, but not all of them. One night, Betty told Mrs. Sewall that the great black man came to her and told her she would be ruled by him. She should have whatsoever she desired and go to a golden city. New England Puritans believed that the devil was dark-skinned like the Indians. So Mrs. Sewall warned Betty that she had just seen the devil, and he was a liar from the beginning, and bid her to tell him so if he came again, which she did. In 1710, Betty married Benjamin Barron of Sudbury. She was 27 years old. Barry was a yeoman, a farmer, a trader, and a shoemaker. The couple had 4 children, 1 boy and 3 girls. We still do not know whether Betty was really sick from the dread disease back in 1692, though she was one of 2 people who were most likely to have been truly ill. Did she ever admit, even to herself, the damage she had done when she testified against her slave Tabutha and against her neighbors? We will never know. Abigail Williams. Paris's niece Abigail stopped giving testimony against the accused witches by June 1692, long before the trials ended. Nobody knows why she disappeared from the hearings, but Abigail is the other accuser who may have actually been sick. She never did fully recover from the fits she had suffered, and was no older than 17 when she died. Ann Putnam, Jr. When Anne was 19 years old, her parents died within 2 weeks of each other, and she was left alone to raise her 9 brothers and sisters. Putnam never got married, but in 1706, when she was 29 years old, she asked to join the Salem Village Church. Always a peacemaker, Reverend Joseph Green offered his help. He guided her efforts to write an apology for lying in court, and he read it aloud in front of his congregation on August 25th. Here is a part of her confession. I desire to be humble before God for that sad providence that befell my father's family. That I, then, being in my childhood, should be made an instrument for accusing several persons of a grievous crime, whereby their lives were taken away. I now have good reason to believe they were innocent, and I justly fear I have been instrumental with others, through unwittingly, to bring upon myself the guilt of innocent blood. I could truly say before God I did not out of any anger or ill will, but was ignorantly deluded by Satan, and I was a chief instrument of accusing of Goodwife Nurse and her 2 sisters. I desire to lie in the dust and be humble for it, and that I was a cause with others of so sad a calamity, for which I earnestly beg forgiveness of God, and from all of those unto whom I have given just cause of sorrow and offense. Putnam was only about 35 years old when she died. Marcy Lewis. Mercy Lewis was still accusing people of being witches as late as January 1693. As she told it, one dark night when the moon slid behind the clouds, the spirit of Mary English had approached her to say the courts were about to free all the witches, so Mercy might as well become a witch too, by signing the devil's book. That way, his witches would stop afflicting her with such terrible fits. Because Lewis was an orphan, she didn't have a dowry to offer in marriage. She apparently did get married at about age 27, though, but not before she had an out-of-wedlock child in 1695. The Innocents. Most of the witches accused who were still alive lost everything they owned. They lost their health, they lost their property, their good reputation, and they lived in poverty. Once everyone in jail was fully acquitted, nobody could go home until they paid for their food and lodging. Now, how are they supposed to pay these bills if their farms had lain fallow because nobody was working the land, or if they couldn't work for wages while they were in prison? Some people had no way to come up with the money, and one woman named Lydia Dustin died in prison as a result. Here is the fate of the rest.